Welcome to the Fresh and Fired Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Marshall, here to help you function at your best in health, fitness, and life. Not Joan. This is a great start. This feels awkward. I got to get used to having someone else in the room.
Start over.
Welcome to the Fresh and Fired Up podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Marshall, here to help you function at your best in health, fitness, and life. Let's get fired up.
Let's get fired up.
Yeah, wanted you to just take note. That is not Haley Pindle's voice. Haley, we love you. We miss you. But she was not able to join us for this episode. So I brought in a special guest, my husband,
Dr. number one fan.
Yep. Dr. Jonathan Marshall. Mainly people call him Dr. John. So welcome and thanks for being on today, Dr. John.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so a little background on this wonderful man of mine. He is... Well, first of all, we've been married for 15 years. We just did a new renewal of vows recently, which was really fun. And together we are raising our 4 children and running a chiropractic clinic. Beyond being a chiropractor, he has degrees in history and political science. And I always think he's quite well informed with what's going on in the world. He keeps me well informed, that's for sure. I always know a little bit about what's going on, but inevitably he typically knows more. The joke with our kids is that mom knows a lot, but dad knows everything. I don't know if that's true. What do you think?
It's probably true.
Probably. So I'm really super glad that he could be on today. In his spare time, he likes to do a lot of reading and in all different topics, I would say. But Currently, your most exciting read, I think you were sharing that you had read through The Lord of the Rings. I can't believe you hadn't read that sooner. But I mean, I haven't read through it. But you seem to really enjoy that one.
It was good.
Yeah. What else do you want to say about yourself? Anything? Did I hit all the high points?
You know more about me than I know about myself, so I think you're good.
That's true. I know trying to get this guy to be consistent coming to the morning gym sessions is a lifelong battle.
That is the battle.
But as you know, we talk a lot about health and fitness on this podcast, and there's all aspects of our health. So today is going to be a little bit more on the mental, emotional side of health in light of the fact that about a week and a half ago was the assassination of Charlie Kirk, as well as a bunch of other really crappy, horrible stuff going on in the news that same week. And I know it definitely hit me hard. Unexpected tragedy in any regard, wars going around, when war is going on, or just something that you're like, okay, we know that evil exists in the world and bad things happen, but sometimes we just get rolling with everyday life and it's like, we don't expect it. And then when something like that happens, it just really can hit you hard and be like, why is this happening? So I wanted to talk about this mainly because my background in this area is that I used to really get afraid and anxious when I would consume any sort of news content. So often, Dr. John would filter what he would tell me about what's going on in a way that's a little gentler because I would find it so devastating to process that it would then affect me, affect my productivity and my mental and emotional state for, I would say longer, well, too long, not sleeping at night and that kind of stuff. And so it left me with this conundrum of trying to ignore and deny the reality of what's going on. And so then I was kind of giving in to being naive and almost oblivious to what's going on around us. And so I would consider this a fear avoidance behavior, which is not a healthy process. We've talked about fear avoidance on other episodes you can go back and listen to, because these are real life scenarios. It's the reality that's actually happening in the world. So we do need to know what's going on. But just because that didn't leave me any less scared. And so either way, it was like breeding this fear in me and I wasn't dealing with it well. And it would kind of lead into this spiral of despair. So I think it is important for us to stay informed. What I want to hear your take on, Dr. John, is, if we're constantly exposing ourselves heavily to the news, it can get draining. But how do we hold this tension between staying informed, but not becoming so mentally, emotionally overload overloaded by tragedy that it's affecting our day-to-day health and our families.
Yeah, you hit an interesting tension. The being aware of what's going on in the world versus I don't know if we were designed as human beings to be able to process tragedies occurring in real time around the world. So up until 100 years ago, it took a while for information to cross an ocean. It took a while to hear about the different things even going on within a province or a country. And so now instantly you're seeing videos of someone being murdered. It would, like last week, 2 of them, you could watch the whole video of the violent murder. And it's, most of us aren't ready to process that. That was something that soldiers alone would process and the rest of the world wouldn't necessarily always be a part of. And so there's this tension of, yes, we need to know what's going on in the world. But yeah, the amount we're having to process, the visual component of the amount we're having to process, I think does a lot of strain on people's mental health. And I don't know if, again, there's such a tension here of shying away from it is the best option. To shelter is not the best option. But yeah, you're right. There's a line of now we're diving too much in and it's becoming our personality and we're letting that control us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I saw a reel on TikTok of all places of a guy going through our brains are being programmed to see these 3 to 5 second bites even. Maybe we're staying on a reel for 10, 15 seconds and if they really capture your attention, maybe you'll get to a minute, right? But what he pointed out, which is like you're getting these spikes in dopamine and then you're getting these drops at a very quick rate. So you could be watching this atrocity occur that just has you in this deep, dark, horrible despair. Like, this is awful what just happened. And then the next video is this like cute little puppy. And you're like, all of a sudden your brain goes, oh, that's so cute. And then the next video is a completely different. So in 1 minute you're laughing and then you might even see something beautiful like an old couple hugging with tears. And now you're crying because you're experiencing that so much. But it's even if we take it like watching a movie, right? The length of a movie, it could be a sad movie, and it's kind of like drawing your emotion in one direction for a longer period of time versus viewing these short bite reels or like it's just up and down and all over the place. And if you already have a propensity of mental illness, which there's a lot of that that's occurring in our world too, then I think that can be too much for a person.
Yeah. Well, Jordan Peterson talked about this. When you have a mismatch of how you view the world, and then when you actually interact with pure evil, you don't know how to comprehend it. And I think many of us across our society are genuinely good people and we love others and we care for others. And when we see extreme violence, one of the disconnects in our mind I figure is we don't comprehend why someone would take those actions. And I think that's the hardest thing because you're like, oh, wow, this person just killed another human being. I could not imagine doing that. And so now you're engaging with real life evil, right? And how do you process, wow, there's someone else in this world would actually do that? Like, you go back to stories of serial killers and whatnot. Like, what would drive someone to be so psychotic that they would repeatedly take the lives of someone else? And in our own minds, it's incomprehensible. And then that's where I think we hit despair. And that's where I think some PTSD comes in because you're like, this doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make sense. And I think that's understanding that why someone would take that action is, sure, they have reasons. They can give all the reasons in the world. It still does not justify their action. Their action is unjustifiable. There's no justification for murder ever.
Well, I completely agree. And I know Jordan Peterson talks about the acknowledging the reality that we all have the ability to take evil actions. Like we are all faced with those same choices, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that would make someone, I guess, not take that choice? You kind of, I guess you could do it on a smaller scale too, right? Where we're not even talking about, oh, I'm going to go out and shoot someone. But I think we have those even smaller choices on the daily. And I wonder if a person who is taking like a more extreme criminal action, was it did it start further back with these small everyday actions of like, should I make the right choice or the wrong choice? And you're perpetually making the wrong choice, or does
I
that
think
make
there's some
sense?
situational dependency because sometimes there might have been someone who's spiraling down into mental illness. They're not getting help. They're feeling more and more isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Versus sometimes there's certain crimes that are or things that occur that are just blind rage in a moment and you're not thinking. And so differentiating, obviously, that's the difference between like a first degree, second degree, and a third degree murder, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the idea of one's intentionally and premeditated, one occurs without premeditation, and the other one is a complete accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're differentiating between those scenarios, and the lines get fuzzy.
Yeah. Well, I know we've had conversations about this before that in our current day culture, there's a lot going on with, how much do we tolerate, right? There's these words of tolerance and intolerance. And I really think that there have been cases where things are being tolerated for longer in when this person actually needed mental illness help quicker.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the thing is when you look at the word tolerance, when you're looking at values and virtues, there's absolute values and relative values. And so tolerance is a relative value. It's we tolerate things, but there's a point where we cease to tolerate. And that occurs with everyday society. You think about your own children, they're running around the house. It's great that they're running around and having fun. Then there's a certain point where the tolerance stops when now they're knocking things over, right? So you're no longer tolerating that behavior. So it's not an absolute virtue, isn't true everywhere, all the time. The same way justice is. Justice is an absolute virtue. Beauty is an absolute virtue.
Mm.
What are some of the others? Love is an absolute virtue, which is willing the good of another for the sake of another. There's not an instance where that is never true. Where like tolerance, there is moments where we do not tolerate certain things, and that's okay. It's not unloving because love is absolute. So it would be loving to be intolerant to an action of a child which could potentially harm themselves, right? They're going to run onto the
Mm.
street. You're going to run out and stop them. And you'd be like, well, they wanted to run it onto the street. Yeah, but being tolerant of them running on the street means they're going to get hit by a car.
Yeah, so you're not tolerating them running out even though
Correct.
you told them not
So it's
to.
not an absolute virtue. It's not true everywhere all the time for everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like even when we're talking about in the scenario of parent to child, right? A lot about setting certain boundaries. I think there's a lot to be said for that. We've talked about boundaries before in that sense where there can actually be more you're the boundary, you're not tolerating something outside that boundary, right?
And
But it
that's a loving action.
mhm.
Because you're setting, like, when you have, let's say, a river flowing and you have no banks, it's just a lazy river, and you're not going anywhere. But when you start to bring in banks, you get a flow, and there's actually things occurring and there's momentum moving forward. So the lazy river analogy for a society is where it just sits and stagnates and gets swampy, rather than, okay, as a society we're moving in a direction, we're moving individually, as a family, as a smaller community, as a province, as a country, as a chunk of the world.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because we've already brought up Jordan Peterson on this podcast. So what you said made me think of a distinction that he says a lot. Which even with that, I like that analogy. Right, we're moving a certain direction. I used to say, keep moving forward, aiming forward, and I think that that's okay. But Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about like aiming upward
Mm-hmm.
too, which I think is another component of it. Right, but
Yeah, it's always that moving forward to a greater goal or a greater beyond yourself, and that occurs on small scales each
mm-hmm.
day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, since we got a little bit on the topic of parents and kids, another question that I had for you was, as parents or leaders in our home, and if you're listening to this, you're not a parent, you could take this to like, are you a leader in your workplace or community in any way? Even if you're an aunt or an uncle, right? I think these principles can still apply. But in this question, I want to ask, as parents and leaders in our home, how do we have hard conversations with our children about the brokenness in the world, still pointing them towards hope and faith and these absolute virtues, but also not sheltering them too much that they are naive to all of
Stories.
it.
Stories is the answer. as a community and as a society, humans, we communicate in stories. Why do you think movies are stories? And traditionally, it used to be stories around a campfire or from a book. And so when you're looking at, we talked about it right at the start, the Lord of the Rings. What makes the Lord of the Rings a compelling story? Well, it's good versus evil, but good always overcomes evil in the end. But good typically always wins through nonviolence. That's not to say that there's not a stand, there's not a battle, but the ultimate, in the end, it's the act of the good that overcomes the malevolence of evil. And so when you're talking to kids, when you're looking at, for example, old fairy tales, a lot of old fairy tales have an evil component. Why? Because they're trying to tell you something true about the world. It's a story that tells you something about morality. It tells you something about reality that exists. But in the end of every fairy tale, well, it doesn't always end wonderfully. Sometimes people die in it. Sometimes there's death or sickness or whatnot. But in the end, good triumphs. And I think in any of these conversations we talk about with children is you don't need to give them all the gory details when they're 7 years old. But as long as children understand not everyone is good, not every situation is good, there is evil that exists, but good always triumphs, and good triumphs through virtuous action and virtuous belief rather than violence back. So as much as we're angry and righteously angry, sometimes think there is an injustice, and being righteously angry is a good thing because it grieves your heart that something bad has happened. But anger should not lead to violence. Anger should lead to a positive action of, okay, how do we actually move forward? How do we prevent this from happening again? What steps do we take individually and as a society to address such a problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Like I like what you said about the communicating in stories and preparing a child's mind for the fact to realize that evil exists and that bad things happen. But then on the flip side, also preparing them just for being in school where maybe your kid has a phone, maybe they don't. Okay. But I know what can happen. I was just talking to another mom about this the other day, where her kids are not allowed to have phones until they're like 18 plus, basically. Our kids don't currently have their own phones. And, she said, it can feel so frustrating when you've got another kid with a phone showing, my young, I don't know the ages of all her kids, but her young child, like, oh, look at this video. And it is the video of the guy getting shot. And her child is not prepared to actually physically watch that. So that to me, and in the conversation, she's like, oh, I wish we could just unanimously decide as parents, or like that it's like not legal to have your own phone and be on these platforms under a certain age. I mean, I don't think that's possible to implement, but I think if you're on the brink, if you're a parent who's like, well, I should get my kid a phone at age 10 because I don't want them to be behind all their peers. Like, I'm like, you're better off not giving it to
The
them
day
at
you
that
give
age.
your child a smartphone is the day their childhood ends.
Right. Yeah, because they basically just have access to everything that you
Correct.
do. And I think
their innocence disappears. And the goal is not to maintain innocence forever. The point is not to stick your head in the sand and run. But the point is you're allowing it to unfold over a period of time that allows them to process it positively. Now, there's going to be generations of previous human beings that have witnessed tragedy and horror at ridiculous ages. You could think about within the 20th century was the most bloody, deadly century, 100 years in human history. Hundreds of millions of people were slaughtered and killed, and all across the world under different ideological positions from far right to far left. And there were kids who witnessed it all. There are kids witnessing it today worldwide. And our North American society is often sheltered, which is okay from that, because it's a good thing that these kids aren't dealing with violent trauma all the time. But at the same point, we need to be realistic of there's things going on and they're going to find out. And how do you prepare them, I guess, is a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. How do you prepare them? Well,
stories.
Yeah.
I go back to that. I'm like, read stories and at appropriate ages that slowly introduce that there is evil. And you can go back to the fairy tales, and they even use the Disney versions to start, where they were tamed down. But you're like, okay, yeah, here's Snow White. Here's the evil queen. Evil exists in the evil queen, and she's trying to take out the good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Snow White goes away. She grows up in the forest, and then it unfolds. But just as that's an example, or Rapunzel is another one. You can use Rapunzel as an example. They all are, this innocent young person encounters evil. They need to grow up and adapt to that evil. And then in the end, the good succeeds and evil is vanquished. And typically, again, it's through nonviolent means.
Mm-hmm. It's basically the same story over and over
It's
again, right?
it's the Christian story over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested if you, I for sure am not no sort of expert on this topic, and maybe you can just give us a few insights, because I remember talking to you about this, because I think Bishop Barron talked about, even when they were making like the new Snow White, they were having trouble making it because it like wasn't trying to not follow the
Yes,
traditional
they're trying to not
storyline.
follow because they're trying to add in newer ideologies, but then the story gets so warped because it no longer has those basic structures. And
Yeah.
then, so sure, it's entertainment, but it doesn't actually tell you this truth, or like the back underpinning of the story had a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and it no longer followed that purpose. So sure, it's the same characters, but it's not actually the same story, because it's not, the purpose is different.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then I feel like as parents, we can take these stories, we can take that story construct that you're talking about and use it to expand on lessons for
Yeah.
our kids.
Well, and that's where, like, for example, even rereading the Lord of the Rings and going through those stories, it's like, oh yeah, here it is again. Here it is again. All of the different characters, and they're designed in a way, or Narnia is another one where they're designed in a way for you to be in the story from multiple different angles,
Mm-hmm.
going through. And, you in certain situations here's your thing, we'll use the Lord of the Rings. You get control of the ring, which is power, and you could either be a Frodo and do good with it and not be controlled by that power, or you could be a Gollum. They're the opposite of each other. Gollum takes the ring and selfishly uses it, and it destroys and eats him, and in the end, it is his demise.
Mm.
Right? So it's like the idea is these are opposite characters. So given the same power, how are you going to act? And essentially that can underpin that whole story.
Right. And that, the acknowledgement of the light side and the dark side, or like, I was just having a conversation with a friend about this yesterday, like kind of like the shadow side.
Most things have a shadow side. Because, for example, technology is wonderful. It saved lives. It allows us to communicate. Think just straight, purely on, you have a phone, you can call, an ambulance can be there. 150 years ago, that's not possible. Someone had to physically go and get it. Go get somebody to come back and try and help. We have surgeries being done on one side of the world with experts on the other. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
The shadow side is there is evil being spread. And it's, okay, how do we propagate goodness and virtue and love across using these technologies for bettering of society, rather than just, we're not going to remove evil. Evil's not removable. That's, I think, the point. Evil's not removable, but the brighter goodness and love and light shines, darkness is then removed or minimized in those areas. Mm-hmm. So it's using it for virtuous action to overcome the evil action using it on the other end.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that requires courage. I've been seeing a lot of videos, even named like kind of like the Charlie Kirk effect. And no, obviously this is the most recent thing that has happened. So this, things like this have happened in the past over and over again. Yes. But as forefront of the mind, it's like this Charlie Kirk effect idea of videos going out of people that otherwise were on the edge of not feeling that boldness and courage to, I think it's been referred to as the silent majority.
Yes.
Correct?
Typically again, that's what it's referred to.
Yeah. And I think that these acts of courage in love and goodness and truth and beauty, all of these virtues, oh man, it takes a lot. Like, and even once what it's not always even just the words you say, right? It's the actions you take. And it doesn't always have to be on media. It could be on media, but it could also just be in your own home or in your own community. I think that's even more important.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because we have this utopian, I'll use that term, idea of, oh, we want to make change and we're going to make change globally. It's like, well, you can't make change globally, and please don't try. And that's okay. That's a good, wonderful thing to understand. Because as soon as you start to be like, I need to take societal change on my own shoulders, it'll crush you. But what can you do? You can take care of yourself. You can take care of your family. How about you start there? And then you move into smaller community, how move from there into a little bit bigger, and it goes bigger. And then societal change occurs when there's mass individuals doing virtuous acts at the same time. So it's not all on one person's shoulders. And I think that's where people get despondent in situations of trying to do good, because they're like, look, I'm doing all I can and nothing's changing. It's like, yes, because you can't change it all yourself.
That's a good point. It's kind of like the old adage of like many hands make light work. Really, like you're doing it. You operate on a grander scale when there's more people doing all these little things to make a difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. So don't wear the fixing of society on your shoulders, because that you don't need to and you can't. So please just take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your small knit community. And hopefully that encourages someone else to do that same thing. And that encourages someone else. And that's how societal change occurs. This idea that we're going to have government come in and they're going to change this and fix this and it'll fix all our ills is actually a modern idea, traditionally not held within most philosophical underpinnings of society. Mm-hmm. The realizing that this government will come in comes from a utopian idea, which comes out of a very left-wing authoritarian idea. Oh, the government's going to come in and they're going to fix all the inequalities in our society. And then all of those societies that they've formed have been awful, right, and murderous, and forced equality is not equality.
So has there been periods of time in history in certain places of the world where this has gone better? Because I feel like...
Well, I think gone better in the fact of look at the society that we currently live in is the least amount of poverty that any human has ever seen. Even I think about the most, an average middle-class person in North America right now has greater access to water, food, anything that they need to live and survive than even the greatest kings 400 years ago.
Right.
Right. So we're looking at this. Yes, there's still people in our society that need love and care and support, and whether they have a drug addiction or a mental health addiction, and we need as a society need to love and care for these people that are on the margins. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the vast majority of society, we are actually doing well enough that people aren't starving regularly. For the most part, people are able to live. Our childhood mortality rate and in pregnancy and birth mortality rates are dropped down to super low rates. It used to be 50% of kids didn't make it past 5. Mm-hmm. Where now it's 98% make it past 5 or 99. I don't remember the exact stat. It's been a while since I've looked at it. But I'm like, okay, we've come a long way within our society. And it's like, okay, look at the good that has been done in our society is we just need to carry on, and not this idea that our society is broken and we need to fix it. Is there can always be improvements, but that to tear it down to complete nothing, we're then starting back to a feudal society. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think those actions that can support those who need our help at any moment of life, right? But you alluded to, or sorry, no, you didn't allude. You said that even the child rates of, what's the word you use?
Mortality.
Yes, thank you. Child mortality rates have gone down as far as pregnancies and all those types of things. But then I guess we were talking about shadow sides. The other side of that is I just heard a stat that in New York City alone, 50% of the babies get aborted, right?
50 don't make it to
birth. Yes. Right. 50%. So that's the whole part where it's how can we in that community, let's just take that. There's one city, mm-hmm. that rate is really high, ridiculously high. How can we make change in those types of things? Well, there are organizations and there are people like putting in time to create the ability to support women through their full term of their pregnancy and after birth, just as examples, right? And those are real people like making those choices to do in those communities.
It's just supporting, and you just work on it one by one. It's a one by one. There is no, again, we got to back up and say, how do we make a societal change? One by one. And take the pressure off ourselves to be like, I need to change everyone all at once with one swift authoritarian action. We need to, in my mind, we need to back away from, there needs to be an authoritarian stamp that like just crushes things. That has never gone well, ever, for society. So it's the small incremental change on small scale. Take the pressure off yourself. Help one person right in front of you. Help the next person. It's Mother Teresa. Help that person right in front of you. Help the next person right in front of you.
Yeah. This is something that has been a good life lesson owning a clinic. We've owned our clinic now for almost 10 years.
Yep.
And it's just like that. You're taking care of one patient at a time. Like each person who comes in the door, every person comes in with something different, and they're there for the right reasons, which are their reasons, not yours. Right. And I think that's a good, it just made me think of that.
It's just one at a time.
Yeah.
Like it's you can't treat 5 people at a time. You can treat one at a time.
Yeah.
You don't have the ability to multitask. You can have the ability to focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Sure, you can bounce back and forth between things faster, but now they're getting half your attention. So it's just a matter of be where your feet are, one person at a time, share love, be good and overcome the evil with goodness. And that is the solution. And when more people do that, more people are encouraged to do that, that's when change occurs society level. Take the pressure off yourself.
Well, and I feel like what can happen mentally, because kind of bringing it back to the very beginning, me introducing this kind of on the mental and emotional health front, is what can happen when our brains are inundated with an overload of information all at once.
Yes.
And that information is all over the map of what it's doing in our emotions and our body chemistry. That can be paralyzing, right? Where it's like you just want to mentally and emotionally clam up and freeze and then do nothing instead of doing what you just said, which is being present with that person right in front of you. I've done that before with our kids where I'm like, I've been inundated by news that day. They come home from school and they're emptying their bags and I feel like I'm just staring as I'm doing the dishes.
Well,
like
you're not hearing anything they're saying.
Yes, I'm in the room with them, but my brain is so wrapped up in all the competing thoughts
that
going
are uncontrollable. That's the other thing is sure, when you see tragic news, that is uncontrollable unless you are physically there to make a difference, which I hope that if you are there, you can make a difference. But if it's happening on the other side of the world and then you are so consumed by that you are ignoring your children right in front of you, that's not a good trade-off.
No.
Right. And so I think maybe kind of wrapping back to the originals, like how do you work through and process all of these things is when we're struggling as human beings, the best thing we can do is get outside of ourselves and care for others. Yeah. So how do you show love to the people most immediate to you? That is within your control. Anything else outside of that is not within your control. So how do I show, like, when you lose someone you deeply love in your life, a good friend, a parent, a sibling, right? It's so devastating and it's so hard to process those feelings, those emotions. But what do is show love, care, show people the love that you would want in return in this situation. That's the way I think about it. So it's like on a small scale, we're going to take the pressure off yourself. You're not changing society on your own. You're caring for the people in front of you, each step at a time, each little person, each act of love, and you allow that to grow, and hopefully it compounds, like compound interest over time.
Yeah, and that can make generational differences. Like if you think about it's going to make an immediate difference in your own brain and your own body chemistry. So if we're talking about your individual health, that will help it. Now, how does that extend? We talk about this a lot. It kind of comes back to the clinic again, is we often center our mission and our vision on creating opportunities to flourish, right? And nurturing generations of people because of exactly what you're saying, right? Where when you can create some resilience within yourself and dedicating to coming back to your present time consciousness with caring for the people right in front of you, whether it be at work or at home or both, then what that does is it creates another opportunity for that person to flourish more.
Yes. Well, and if you wrap it back into the audience for your podcast is women who often have a health struggle of some sort, an eating issue, a body dysmorphia type issue, an exercise issue, or maybe they just want to grow and learn. Those are all great reasons. And it's like, underpin the reason for your change. Yes, you need to, quote, do it for yourself, but there's also put your mask on before you put the mask on the person next to you. At some point, in order to care for someone, you need to be in a place where you can care for people.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, are you yourself healthy? Are you yourself grounded? Are you yourself in a position where helping someone's not going to unravel your own life?
Right.
So I think encouragement is, okay, underpin everything you do is love. The 2 great commands: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And it's like, okay, so be in a position to love your neighbor as yourself. Will their good in every situation.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that is different than if we go too far to the opposite end of the spectrum, where I know some of you are struggling with the people pleasing and the like, do everything for everything else and don't ever take care of myself. That kind of wraps into what you said. And then what can happen there is you can form resentment. And then you have to ask yourself, are you resenting something about yourself? Are you resenting something about others that you're serving? Or are you resentful with certain situations? And I think even with grander world scale situations, we can form that resentment. So I like that you're reminded us to like recenter our behaviors, health behaviors, and really everyday actions out of love.
If you're getting resentment out of helping someone, you're not helping them out of love. You're helping them out of obligation.
Yes.
You've now swapped it. You're not, I'm doing this because I love you, but love doesn't overextend to the point of obligation.
Right.
So if you're feeling obligated to help someone, maybe there's an underlying incongruency in why you're helping. Maybe there's an underlying power distribution within that relationship.
Yeah. So those are good questions to ask. And I think that, yeah, it's just a matter of like allowing yourself to process this information. Sometimes more questions arise after conversations like this. So please reach out to me if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you so much for being on today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And make sure you share this episode with a friend. If you haven't clicked the subscribe button yet, come on, now's your opportunity. It's a free, easy way to support the content and get it out to more people. So yeah, we can share the love, right? I think that's a good idea. And in the meantime, be free, feel fresh, and live on fire.